Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, just a quick 1-minute announcement to let you know about my virtual courses and free masterclasses. I have courses and free masterclasses based on both of my books. I have the Ultimate Thyroid Course. This is your answer to solving any thyroid issue, whether it be Hashimoto's, radioactive iodine, thyroidectomy after thyroid cancer, or just general hypothyroidism. Reverse T3 issues as well. It's an incredible value at 17 modules and 29 hours of content with amazing guest expert tutorials. I also offer the Ultimate Confidence Course. That is 15 modules and 14 hours with also a few guest expert tutorials. An incredible value, and I have free masterclasses on both of those topics as well. Visit elleruss.com to learn more. Dr. John Demartini, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I'm so honored, and I want to share with everyone listening. I've been following your work for since 2007, 2006 or so. I remember being in Maui for several weeks alone. I was visiting some relatives there, and I remember listening to your audiobook at the time. Well, one of many books that you've written. And so it is such an honor to be able to speak with you finally. If you had asked me then that I would have the chance to interview you or even be interviewing at all, I would have said, "Oh, you're crazy," right? So it is just really an honor to meet you and share you with my audience. And I guess what I'd like to start with is you have been in the arena of such wonderful content regarding self-help, self-improvement, really manifesting and materializing one's dreams, and really, I think what we're all searching for, which is happiness really being the ultimate success, no matter which way you cut it, even though, of course, you talk about wealth in some of your things. So before we get into your new work, can you just tell us how you started on this journey of becoming who you are and the contributions you've made?
Well, my journey in I guess you could say, the human potential industry started in 1972. And so it's 50 years in a few weeks. 50 years. And I was in Hawaii, on the North Shore of Oahu. And I was a long-haired hippie surfer character, which there was a lot of them in those days. And I had a close brush with nearly dying in a surfing experience, and led me in the recovery of that, to a little class that Paul C. Bragg was presenting. And one night in 1 hour, this one man inspired me to believe that maybe I could overcome my learning challenges. I had speech impediment, dyslexia, and learning problems, and I was told that I would never be able to read or write or communicate effectively. And so I was a surf guy because I could stand on a surfboard, but communication and education wasn't the thing. And so I dropped out. I left school at a very young age, and was a street kid, a tent kid. So my life changed one night meeting Paul Bragg, and I made a dream to overcome my learning problems, learn how to read and speak properly, and learn how to write properly, and go and pursue those avenues as an intelligent person, a teacher. And I wanted to travel the world and share whatever I discovered with people, whoever would listen. And that was a journey in 1972. And sooner or later, a few people started listening, and a few more. And I've been blessed now to speak in 181 countries. So I've been doing it 50 years now, just in a few weeks.
It's amazing the overcoming of that situation. So many people labeled as something, told, declared about their own life, something that might be true that isn't. And you challenged it, which is really, really part of your, sort of one of your mottos, right? The quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask. And so the curiousness of what if it weren't the case now, right? What if it could be better? I remember reading one of the first two books of yours, The Riches Within. I think that is it. I got that right. The book about gratitude as well. And I want to get into those things because I feel like people need to understand the importance of gratitude even further And instead of writing a list of thankful for my arms, thankful for my eyes, great, now I go about my day, really feeling the feelings of it. And also going within your new book, well, the most recent book, 7 Secrets, the Treasures of a Transformation of a Blueprint for a Well-Lived Life. Let's talk about some of those secrets, but I'd like to get into, we all have this blueprint, right? So where do we start? Someone's down and out. They've been told you can't move above a certain area of your career, or you're not smart enough for X, Y, Z. Where does someone even start to think differently?
Well, in my observation, working with people all these years, is that every human being lives with a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important in them in their life, that is literally fingerprint specific to them. And whatever is highest on that list of priorities and values, that's where they excel. That's where they spontaneously are inspired to fulfill whatever that is. But anytime somebody is doing something lower on that list or pursuing something lower on the list, they tend to procrastinate, hesitate, frustrate. They tend to not have that stamina to fulfill it. And they procrastinate, hesitate, frustrate, and they hold themselves back. So first thing I think for any human being is to identify what they are intrinsically really dedicated to. A lot of people have kind of fantasies about what they say is important to them, but then their life doesn't demonstrate it. Your life demonstrates what you really value. And identifying where you have that are really valuable is where you're going to excel. Now,
what about the person, though? I can imagine someone hearing that and saying, well, wait a minute, my life around me is not what I want, and I don't identify with it. I didn't ask for this, feeling like maybe that's a victim blaming, like, oh, what I have around me is important to me, but all of this, everything's falling apart. I'm a shit magnet, or whatever the story is. And I can see someone sort of having a little bit of an objection to that. So can you address that?
Well, I really am not really concerned about their objections. I've been doing it 50 years, and I've seen all the victim games that people play.
Yeah.
I'm solid and certain about what I just said. Unless an individual, anytime you pursue something that you think is important, but isn't demonstrated to be important, you're going to end up beating yourself up. You're going to end up having chaos, which is a feedback mechanism to let them know that they're not being authentic to themselves. Let me give you an example. I was in South Africa in 2013, I think, or 2012. And I had about 5,000 people in my class. And I asked them, how many of you would love to be financially independent? Well, every hand went up. Some had 2 hands, some had 2 hands and a leg. And I said, okay, so you all say you want to be financially independent. Great. Now, in my mind, I already know that's not true. And then I asked them, what's the percentage of people that actually obtain it? And I heard all over the room, 1%, 2%, 3%. It's actually less than 1%. So isn't it interesting that 100% of people had their hands up saying they want something, but only 1% or less actually achieve it? So that's the ratio of illusions that people are under about what they say is important to them. I am not interested in what you say is important. I'm interested in what your life demonstrates, because that's the fact. And living in a delusion about what you say is important, instead of facing the fact of what your life demonstrates is truly important to you, is a first thing to grow up and to mature enough to see the truth about yourself. Many people hold on to fantasies and they compare themselves to others. They inject the values of others in their life. They think, oh, I envy them. I want to imitate them. I want to be somebody I'm not. They want to be second at being somebody else instead of first at being who they are. And they don't look honestly, reflectively at what their life demonstrates. What I did is I had these same people. Then I told them, I said, I'm going to give you 10 million US dollars. And you're going to have 60 seconds to decide what you're going to do with it. And you have the opportunity to write 10 things you're going to do with it. And then when I said to them, on your mark, get set, go. And they had 60 seconds to write the 10 things they would do with $10 million. And they quickly, just really rapidly wrote this thing down. And then at the end, I said, now turn it to the person on your left. And then the person on the left, now count up how much of that money is now usable as an asset. You start out with 100% asset. Now what's left? 20 to 80% of that room had spent it on consumables that depreciated in value. And they basically bought things that went down in value. They bought a house, they bought clothes, they bought a car, they went on a trip. They didn't buy things that went up in value. So the people who said they want to be financially independent, their life demonstrates right off the bat in a matter of seconds that they really want the lifestyles of the rich and famous, the fantasy, instead of actually doing the objective facts of buying true assets that go up in value. So many people are under delusions about what they say they want. I want a soulmate. I want to have a business. But their life is what I go by, not what they fantasize and talk about. Talk is cheap. It's what their life demonstrates they're committed to doing, that they spontaneously do. That's what they truly value. And I've been doing value determinations 45 years, and I'm certain about that.
You know, it's funny when you posed that question to them, and I was listening to that about the 10 million. I thought, I think the 10 things I would just repeat, I would just write, I would use it to make 10 more million. Like, I don't know. That's sort of like where my mind went to immediately. And I know that most people would be like, okay, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that. And by the time you know, you're like, wow, do you even have the money to pay taxes for the house that you just spent? It's like, it's like years ago, we joked around about the perfect tagline for like a Bentley ad. And my friend came up with, if you can only afford one, you can't afford one, right?
Good line.
You know? So yeah, that's interesting.
What's interesting is people aren't honest with themselves. I mean, I've been doing value determination processes, like I said, 45 years. And I've only had one individual from Israel that was congruent and honest with their answers. So that's why I'm certain that what people say. Now, the reason why people are victims of their history, not masters of their destiny, is because they don't know themselves. They're basically a composite of a bunch of ejected idealisms from the collective society that they're subordinating to. And they're not facing the truth of their own nature and looking at what they really are doing and then honoring that. They're not honoring what they're committed to and what their life demonstrates. If they were a drone watching over you, looking at you, and actually watching what your life really demonstrates and looked at that, most people can't face the truth of their own nature. They want to live in a fantasy and a delusion, and they'll buy the opium of the masses instead of actually get grounded in the masterful path. So the first thing is to identify what's really, really, truly important to you. And then you have two choices. Either set goals that match it, or there's a science on how to transform it. Because if you say you want to be wealthy, I can show you how to rearrange the value structure so you increase the probability of doing that. But unless you're actually taking the money you get and buying assets with it, it's not going to happen. Unless you're putting it into something that produces more than it cost, which is an asset, which is a company or a series of stocks of companies or real estate holdings or something that goes up in value, you're not going to have money working for you. You're going to be working for it as a slave instead of its master.
I love your directness. And I think everyone listening is like, yep, you're just speaking the truth. Agreed on all levels that authenticity reigns supreme. And the method you developed, the Demartini Method, is really all about this, right? Mind mastery is life mastery. And you are, and I think everyone can hear this, you're calling for people to take accountability for their perceptions, right? Which is what you talk about, their actions, so that they can unlock this door. Exactly. And I guess with all of your work over these 50 years, well, first, let's get into something that, you've already touched on, and everyone listening, most people want to be financially independent, right? I have an affirmation I say. This has been true for many years. I'm so grateful for the financial freedom and abundance to do what I want whenever I want. And it is probably the best life, in my opinion. And I'm assuming you would say the same. The freedom is incredible. And I know most people want that, and it's very hard for them to wrap themselves around it. So how can one what are some questions one can ask themselves right now in this moment, if they're listening and they're like, oh, that does sound good. I want to get there. I want to be in that situation. Where do I even start with my mind?
Well, you're talking about for financial independence?
Yeah, to be financially independent.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, financial independence is first defined as having passive income exceeding the needs of active income. That means if you make X number of dollars a year and that's what you're living on, then what exactly do you want to live the lifestyle that you want? And then that has to be passively earned. There were 10 questions that a gentleman asked me when I was 27 years old to find out if I was truly committed to financial independence. Maybe I could share those they changed the course of my life.
I would love that.
The first thing, I was 27. I was in my new office, and this guy was a financial planner that happened to be looking for clients apparently, and came in, and I had a moment, so I chatted with him. He said, "Do you want to be financially independent?" I said, "Yes." He said, "If I asked you 10 questions, if you have the answers to those, I will believe that's true. If you don't know the answers to those, I will be certain it's not." Ooh, that's a challenge. So I said, "Fire away. What are your total assets right now?" Now, believe it or not, I was not quite savvy to know what that meant. So I dodged the question by saying, "Well, what do you mean by an asset?" So he said, "Well, things like stock holdings, companies that have an equity, property that has equity in it, real assets." And he listed them, stock bonds and things of this nature. And I said, "Okay." And I had to calculate it. I didn't know. If you don't know where you are, you don't know what you want as a financial independent number, and you don't have a strategy, it's not going to happen. It's a fantasy. So I had to get grounded in what my assets were. And I finally nailed it down with him, with his help. And he knew he wasn't naive at this. He knew that I was learning. And so he helped me, and I got the number. And that wasn't a lot because I'd just gotten out of school and I had debt. And then the second question he has is, what is your total liabilities? Now, I knew that one. I had that one at the French because I was paying debt. So I knew half of that. So I got the liabilities down, and I wrote that number down, and I think I was pretty accurate with that. The third question is what's your assets minus your liabilities? What's your total net worth? At that time, it was negative. I owed more money than I had. And so I had a negative net worth. So I wrote that down, and I was, it wasn't impressive. It was a little humbling. I didn't want to show that and admit that, but I did. The fourth question is what is the number that you would love to live on annually, passively, per year, annually? And I went blank. I said, well, because if you don't know what that is, you're not having a goal for something. And now at the time, I was a student. I just graduated. I just opened up the thing, and I thought in 1982 that 100,000 six-digit figure was at least, if you had that passive, that's not bad. So I just came up with a number of $100,000, which today would be like 600,000. And I wrote that number down, and he said, "Fine. Is that sufficient for the lifestyle you want? Have you actually thought of all the variables? Is that going to cover all the things you're going to want to do?" At the time, I thought, yeah. Now, I wasn't married. I didn't have a house yet. I didn't have a bunch of things happening. It was just starting to happen. I was dating somebody who wanted to place, And so I really didn't have any grounding about what might be involved, or that number would have probably been higher. I was just thinking of a single guy, And then the fifth question, was what's the average interest rate you can earn on that money from your investment knowledge? Well, my investment knowledge was about a zero. All I could think of is what the bank accounts offered. And it was high at the time because inflation was high. So I said 8%. Great. And then he said, now, what's the inflation rate that you're going to be facing over the next 40 or 50 years of your life as you build your wealth? I said, I have no idea. He said, well, on average, 4% might be real, but let's just say right now it's a bit around 3%, but let's just say 3%. It's going to fluctuate. Now, after that, it was around 1% and 2% for many years, but now it's going back up. But let's just say 3%. So that meant 8% for the interest earned and 3% erosion on inflation. He said, now the next question is how much money do you need in your total net worth, earning 8% minus 3% for inflation, which means 5%, to give you $100,000 a year? So I had to calculate that 5% into 100% is 20. I had to multiply 100 times 20. That's $2 million. I said, I need $2 million. And at that moment, I just thought, whoa, that's quite a bit at that time, at 27 years old. I needed it today. I don't mean it someday. I needed it today. Now, at the time, I was saving $200 a month, $50 a week, $10 a day at the time. So in the process of doing it, I said, okay, I need $2 million. And then he asked the next question. What is the difference between what your current net worth is and this, and what's the shortfall? How much more do you need to have? Well, I had a negative self-worth, net worth. So I had to go through it and add another 100,000 to it. So I had $2.1 million I needed today. He said, all right. So the next question, number 9, what is your strategy to get there? And so these are real numbers. By the way, if you get an Uber and you say, I don't know where I am, I don't know where I'm going, and I have no idea how to get there, he's not going to take you anywhere. He's going to not get you in the car. And this car is called your life. So then what I did is I said strategy. So I thought, okay, I need $2.1 million today in the next 24 hours. How do I do that? I couldn't think of anything. I need $1,050,000 in the next 2 days. I couldn't think of anything. I need $525,000 over the next 4 days. Couldn't think of any. And I kept dividing that by 8 days, 16 days, 32 days. I kept doing it. And no matter how far I went, it seemed like there's just no way. I'm only saving $200 a month. I'm a little overwhelmed by that right now. So I thought, and I had a headache, an itchy bottom, an abdomen that was sore, eyes that were red. I was starting to think, am I really committed to financial independence? Is this going to happen? Is it possible? Am I under an illusion? I had no idea it was this difficult. Do I have to lower the number, or do I have to figure out how to make more income? What is my strategy here? And he waited as I went through this conniption fit and jaw tight and headache. And he says, if you don't have a strategy, I guess you're not really committed to doing it, because when the why is big enough, the hows will take care of themselves. You got to come up with a strategy, or you need to get some mentorship to help you, which is what he was trying to do. He's trying to get me to help him. Well, finally I said, I need to use the restroom. So I went down the thing and I just sat on the can, excuse the expression, and sat there in my head and just go, what the hell am I going to do? And then something came to me, an ingenious idea came. I thought, I can do $200 a month now, but I could do 300 and then 400 and then 500. I could increase it until eventually it's up to what I need to do per month, and add it and buy assets. And I saw what I call a forced accelerated savings technique. And I came up with that term, and a forced accelerated investment technique, fast and fade. I came back, I said, I got a solution. I will make a commitment that as I grow my business and as I learn, I'm going to increase the amount I'm going to save on a regular basis. And I came up with a solution. But then I realized, in order to get $2 million, I need to stretch this thing out. And so I gave myself 18 years. So in 18 years, I'm going to need twice that amount at about 5%. I'm going to need twice that amount. So I'm going to need $4.2 million. And so I thought, okay, $4.2 million times that many months. And that came out to $20,000 a month I had to average to grow my assets. That's with compounding. And I thought, I'm doing $200 a month. I need 100 times that amount per month to get this goal. I was overwhelmed. So I decided that I was going to escalate it. And I started saving 200. 3 months later, I made it 300. 3 months later, I made it 500. 3 months later, I made it 750. 3 months later, I made it 1,000. I ran a projection of where I would be if I did $1,000 a month. It would take 34 years to be a millionaire, and I still wasn't going to cut it. But I kept increasing at 10%, 1,010 or 1,100, 1,210, 1,344. I kept doing it until every 2 years, the amount doubled. But then when my debts stopped, I took what I was paying the debt and I added to it. And then I kept increasing it 10%. At the end of 9 years, I achieved the financial independence by accelerating the savings and buying assets. I bought mainly stocks. I did buy real estate also, but I just kept buying assets. I lived within my means. I didn't raise my lifestyle until I raised my savings, and my investments, and my taxes equally as amount. If I couldn't do those, I wasn't ready to go and raise my lifestyle. Kept my lifestyle simple. Age 36, going on 37, I was financially independent. And now I'm 50 times that, 50 multiples of financial independence today, because I never stopped.
Wow, that is such a, first of all, those are amazing questions to ask oneself. And also, I love the breakdown in your head as how you described it, because this is, again, what people are probably feeling and thinking. And what I gather as well is once you had a plan and a strategy, even though it was, again, this escalation, I can only imagine that when you got to the month where you were like, hey, I'm contributing 300 again, increasing that sort of maybe self-esteem and confidence and even furthering of that intention of that goal. And then and 3 months later, that in and of itself, right, part of that strategy, sort of moves you again so much further in that direction. And so I hope everyone hears like how on a minute level you can start doing something like this now and start thinking about this. That's amazing.
What I did is I went to a Schwab discount broker at the time, and they were nearby, walking distance, and well, not walking, but close. And they didn't have a paperwork in order to have it automated to do it an increase every 3 months. You had to go in there and sign a piece of paper every 3 months. And I said to the lady, I said, I don't want to do that. I want to sign them. So bring out all the papers I need for the next so many years. And she said, no one's ever done that. And what I did is I realized that about every 90 days, once you do something, you'll get a comfort with it. So I did it and I made it increase. When I hit $1,000 a month, I made it automated. It was electronically done at an increase of 10% every quarter. And that's quite a bit of growth, more than that. So what I did is I made a commitment also in my business that I would make a list of everything I was doing. I would prioritize that list according to what was productive down to least productive, most to least. And then I would learn to delegate more. So I kept delegating more, doing the highest priority thing, sticking to the very highest priority thing, giving myself permission to do only the things that were most important and that needed my skills, my core competence, letting go of the rest, surrounding myself with people that did all the other stuff so I could extract surplus labor value out of their work. I liberated myself from doing things. Today, I only teach, research, write, and travel. I do nothing else. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I have not driven a car in 32 years. I have people doing everything. Now, one guy said, I do almost everything for you except wipe your butt. And I then had him start to do that.
Here's a roll of toilet paper, buddy.
Buddy, I'm joking. But the point is that if you're not doing what you love and filling your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your self-worth is going to erode to let you know you're not being authentic to what's meaningful to you. The world is guiding you to live an extraordinary life, but we're overlooking the signs. And we're beating ourselves up because we're doing low priority things, and we're designed to beat ourselves up when we do that. We are designed to self-depreciate when we're not doing what's really, truly inspiring and meaningful to us. It's not a flaw in us. It's a feedback in our physiology to let us know that we're not being truthful to ourselves about what we really want to dedicate life to, and being honest enough to get help to structure our life so we can do that. That's where I come in. That's what I help people do, to help them structure their lives and organize their life so they don't have to be doing low priority stuff and devaluing themselves and holding themselves back from financial independence.
Well, and this really also speaks, your last point there speaks to every entrepreneur, even, because at some point you are everything at once initially, right? You're your own PR agent, you're your own, you're doing all the things yourself. And at some point you have to get they become low priority in the game of advancement. And so that's something everyone really needs to hear. And you do have, look, what you offer people, not only your trainings, your method. I want to just open up with this. There's something you said, not today, but that I read that I love. And I would love you to, because this is about our perceptions, and that really contributes to whether we're happy, whether we're sad. You say every emotion is a byproduct of your ratio of perceptions. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I'm a neurologist. I taught neurology many years now. I'm writing a big textbook on it right now. And so one thing that I'm certain about is that each perception, we have receptors that transduce stimuli, smell, taste, sight, etc., translate into graded or action potentials that go into the spinal cord and then up the spinal cord into the areas of the brain, higher areas of the brain. On the way up, it picks up with a bunch of interneurons and creates associations with it. And then by the time it gets to our brain, we have a perception of what's happening. Now, if we perceive it in a state that we're conscious of the positives about it, but unconscious of the negatives, it's going to, by the time it gets to the thalamus, it's going to go over to the amygdala and then back over to the hippocampus to assign a valency of positive over negative and create an impulse through the cerebellum to make you seek it. And so you're going to be now seeking that thing that you think has more benefits and drawbacks, more positives and negatives, more ups and downs. And so you're going to react to it as if it's something attractive. Now, when you actually get there, just like if you were Michael Douglas and meeting Glenn Close for the first time, when you got there, it may not be what you thought, but your ratios of perception caused an impulse to seek it because you didn't have a balanced perception. You had a polarized perception with more advantages and disadvantages, more ups and downs. If you perceive more downs than ups, more downsides and you're conscious of the downsides and unconscious of the upsides, you're now going to do the same pathway, except it's going to go to a different area in the amygdala, and it's going to assign a negative valency to the hippocampus, and you're going to have a perception that it's something to avoid, and you're going to have an instinct to avoid it because it's a predator to you. And so now the world on the outside, once you have an imbalanced perspective, causes you to either avoid or seek. So the world on the outside is running you, and people that have imbalanced ratios of perceptions are always victims of their history and of their environment. And much of psychology is built on that. They believe that the world and environment determines your destiny. Nope, that's a path of the masses, not the path of the master. The master realizes that they have control over their perceptions, their decisions, and their actions. They can change the ratios of their perception by asking different questions and make them cognizant of what they were unconscious of and see both sides of an event. Because the person you first are infatuated with, a day, a week, a month, a year, or 5 years later, you turn out to be, they're not what you thought. They have a whole bunch of challenges that come with them.
And then back to your reference, then they're boiling a rabbit on your stove.
Exactly. So what you do is you realize that you can have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process, or you can have it without it. If you ask the questions up front, cognitively, and look for the downsides, you're not going to be impulse to go into that and look for immediate gratification. You're going to be more reasonable. And so we have systems 1 and systems 2 thinking. Systems 1 is the amygdala that's basically reacting before it thinks. And systems 2 is thinking before it reacts, where it's more executive function. When we balance out our ratios of perception by asking questions of what we're unconscious of and bring everything fully conscious and see both sides of things, the thing goes up into the cortex and the executive center, and we're objective. We're not subjectively biased with impulse and instinct. And now we act wisely. And then our reality doesn't run our life. Our perception of reality, we took command of. And that's the difference between a master and the masses. The masses are basically victims of their history. The master is the one that take whatever happens to them and they turn it into on the way, not in the way.
Well, and this leads, in part of my line of work, being an ancestral health expert, looking at our hunter-gatherer ancestors, one of the qualities is, failure was only feedback. They didn't really wallow in self-pity and victimhood. It was moving onward and upward, right? And that's wonderful, and we should adapt to that. But what you're talking about in terms of perception, so this has been proven to me in my life. I've talked about this, written about it, which is two of the seemingly worst things that could happen in one's life, right, to me, were the absolute freaking best, would never go back in time. And so now I feel like I can more easily choose the perception when something seemingly, negative or seemingly not beneficial to me. And I go, no, hold on, this is going to be good. What if this were, because I have had that experience, and so I feel like it's easier for me to choose that perception because I've had it. But still, even people do have those experiences and they still don't carry forward that perception. And I think a lot of people would say, well, this seems like dreaming. But what I guess my ancestral connection to that is, let's say you're, stranded on the side of the road for a second. The person who's using your method, and I'm sure even you would go, all right, well, this will be interesting to see what happens here, or this could turn into something really great, even though I'm delayed. I'm sure your choice of perception would be so much different. And in that moment, you are lowering all of the fight or flight ancestral things that we're still a slave to. And this is where you're talking about being a master, being able to have the mastery over that in knowing, hold on, right? Let's lower it down. Cortisol is going to drop, right? Adrenaline, and getting out of that ill-perceived fight or flight when it's not. It's just our genetic makeup spawning us to that. But we have a choice too. You can cognitively, and that's really a part of your work, which I love because it is a choice, and it may seem a little fake at first because something seemingly is bad. So maybe you have something more to say on that, but I love all of that.
See, one of the biggest delusions that we've been indoctrinated is moral hypocrisies. they come from preachers, teachers, mothers and fathers and politicians most of the time. And they're the idea that this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong and this is only positive, this is only negative. And that stops people from seeing that everything is an event. And what you assign to it, just like Milton said, John Milton said, you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. One thing in one country, you know, marijuana in America is now legalized. It was once you went to prison for it.
Yeah, boy, I'm glad I'm not a criminal anymore.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, now I'm not a marijuana guy. I was when I was a teenager when it was criminalizing.
Yes.
But the point was, it has nothing to do with the world out there. It has everything to do with what you decide to make of it. And so you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. It's your choice. I've taken people through almost every imaginable thing they've been through, from beatings to killings to rape and you name it. It's not the event. It's what you decide and how you perceive it and use it. Now, I had a guy from South Africa about 8 months ago who was scheduled to have a consult with me. He was a CEO of a big company. And he was driving down the highway, you know, in a very crowded, congested highway. And there were cars around him. It was all packed. And all of a sudden, the cars moved around and 4 cars surrounded him. And they got out. The people got out of the cars at machine gun, came up to his window, knocked out his window, opened up his car at machine gun, literally surrounding him, and left his car on the freeway, got him in the back of a car and slammed the door on top of him. And for 5.5 hours, he had to be in the back of this trunk, driving out to this real strange area in the country somewhere, and said, unless you pay the ransom, because he was a wealthy guy that was well known, of a CEO of a company and had kids and stuff, unless you pay the ransom, we're going to kill your family. So that's a scary situation. Most people would call that a bit traumatic.
Oh,
okay,
it's the worst case scenario.
A little bit, right? So he's under post-traumatic stress diagnosis. He's under medications, but saying and not really getting anywhere. This is going on for months now. And so they contact me. So I get on the Zoom with him, and I said, fantastic. Go to the moment when they actually put you in the trunk. Okay. And you're in a dark trunk. You have a little bit of light coming through, and you're not knowing what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get killed. You don't know if your family's going to get killed. It's a bit challenging. And at that moment, the mind will go to a freeze response. If you can't fight, you can't flight, you'll go into a freeze and you'll dissociate and create an anti-memory, an opposite composite content-driven memory inside your mind to counterbalance it. So at that moment, when you are sitting there feeling constrained, go to that moment, get really present in that moment. Your mind took you somewhere where you were free. What was the image that came in your mind? When we got him really present in that moment, in that trunk, he said, wow, I'm holding hands with my wife and my children, literally running and hopping through a field free. I said, because the mind, when it has constraint, will automatically dissociate from that and associate with the opposite in order to create a homeostasis in the brain to maintain homeostasis for survival. And I said, now go to the next second. And when you're doing that, he said, you felt smell. You said it was smelled like gasoline and everything else. Great. And you thought it was something that could explode and you could be dead. Great. In that moment, where did you dissociate? He said, flowers. The fragrance of flowers was in my mind, and it was safe and secure. And I took him through each one of the perceptions that he had, found out the anti-perception. It's called an anti-memory at Journal of Neuron Magazine, 2016. And I showed him that at that exact moment, his homeostatic brain was actually bringing both sides. And I brought him into the awareness. So he, instead of being conscious of the negatives and unconscious of the positives, I made him aware of both sides. He was fully conscious. When he did, he goes, I don't even feel the trauma of that right now, because I'm now seeing both in my mind. Now, I then asked him, well, now that you're there, go to that moment when you're now putting in the room and you're basically being a bit tortured and you're being threatened and you have to somehow get an access on a telephone to get millions of dollars sent into their accounts. What's the benefit of that? And at first he said, how can there be a benefit in that? I know. What's the benefit to you of that? And he went blank, and he finally said, Well, once I did that, my attachment to money, I've been driven by finances, and I had to let go of some of those so I could be with my family. I was so wanting to be with my family and so wanted to make sure they were safe that I was willing to do that. Never in my career was I willing to sacrifice my money for my family until that moment. I had been sacrificing my family for my money.
Mm.
And that was an eye-opening, tear-jerking moment when he realized he loved his family and he was willing to give up the money for that. Now, in that moment, once he sent the money, they set him free. They dropped him off in the middle of friggin' nowhere, but he got back home, got to his family. He had not ever been that close to his family. He just held them and got close to them. Now, while he was in business, he was a driven CEO, driven, taking the family for granted, not seeing the kids. He had hypertension, was not taking care of his health, was overweight. The 5 weeks he was doing this to raise this money, it was a large sum of money, he lost weight. When he got home, he was now back to normal weight. He loved his family. And during that time, I kept asking him the benefits of what this whole thing was about. He said he found out that all the people that he was trying to get to delegate all the responsibilities in his business to stood up, took command, and built the business. And during the time that he was in that 5 weeks, they had made more money than he had normally done. It actually showed that he was in the way of the business.
I love this.
Now, when he gets back, he said, I'm back with the people I love. I've got people taking command. I'm not having to be doing everything, which I thought I had to do. I'm now not micromanaging. My blood pressure's down. My weight is down. I'm now working out. I'm eating well. I'm with my wife. I'm seeing my beautiful kids for the first time. My company is running on its own. And the amount of money that I made in the time that they asked for the ransom was more than the ransom. So I said, well, then what you're saying is that you paid a consultant fee to help you get your life in order and to get your family back and to be able to manage and be more efficient and make more income. And he started to cry. He said, you know what? The perceptions that I had when I was here, less than 2 hours ago till now,
yes,
are completely flipped. I thought it was a post-traumatic stress. I thought that I was this. Right now, I'm grateful. I almost want to write a thank you letter thanking them for no consultant would have got into my head as efficiently. And what's interesting, in the back of my consciousness, my intuition was whispering, I'm going to end up losing my wife and end up in a divorce, and I'm going to end up with a bitter thing, and I'm going to not be seeing my kids if I don't do something. And if I'm going to burn out and end up crazy if I don't figure out how to be able to delegate these things. So he was unconsciously yearning. And so his unconscious motives eventually manifested a way of getting what he wanted.
That's right.
And so when he got to that realization, he was grateful with tears of gratitude, went home and told his family that. They were blown away by what his realization was. And instead of seeing a trauma, he saw something that was grateful. And so gratitude transcends the labels of the moral and ethical labels that are hypocrisies that people trap themselves in, because they don't take the time to see both sides of an event in life.
That is one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. And I bet he would say he would go back in time and do it all over again for that realization that he ultimately received in your conversation, because of how that enriched his life. And of course, all of the amazing things he discovered about his business at the time, and again, gratitude. So, hey, how about, yes, we're going to have events that are contrasting, but someone might be listening and thinking, all right, well, I'd rather not wait until a hostage situation, or something like this. So where can people, what do people need to know about gratitude and sort of, I guess, like preemptive gratitude, but you know what I mean? Before you get there.
There's simple questions. I've developed a method over the last 50 years. That's very simple. Well, I say it's simple. It's simple, but you have to be honest with yourself. And many people want to run their story and run their racket and stay the victim. And they got unconscious motives many times to stay that way because people give them sympathy, who knows what. But the first question is when you're upset with somebody, or you have this event that somebody does that you don't like, is ask, what specific trait, action, or inaction do I perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that I dislike, despise, hate, withdraw from? most? First, define it. Because if you're running a story, I don't know what it is, I'm just upset. You're not getting anywhere. You're letting an amygdala run your thing and just running and using false attribution biases, and you're being vague and subjectively biased and exaggerating things instead of grounding yourself. If you stop and ask that, narrow that down, just know you can never resent anything in somebody else that's not reminding you of something you feel ashamed of in your past. That's a real deep realization that's been around all the way since the time of Christ. In the New Testament, in Romans at 2:1, it talks about that very thing. And if you go further back into the Chinese, you'll find that. You go back to the Egyptians, and it's written in the great recension of the Book of the Dead. So we are not going to have something that we judge that we don't have inside our life. But we may be too proud to admit we have it, and we may cover it up with our addiction to our fantasy of who we are. But the reality is that we don't judge anybody else unless we're doing something that's reminding us of. The reason we resent them is because they're reminding us of something we feel guilty about, and we don't want to face our guilt. Our avoidance of the loss of pride and our avoidance of the gain of shame makes us lie to ourselves about what life's about. So the second thing is to ask this question. Now that you've owned that, and now that you see what the trait is, now you ask this question. John, go to a moment where and when I have displayed or demonstrated that same specific trait in action that I despised in them most. And go to a moment where I did that. Mm-hmm. And identify where it is and when it was and who is it to and who perceived me that way. And then go the next moment and the next moment, next moment. You'll eventually get to the one that you're feeling guilty about. And then all of a sudden you'll have a tear come up and you realize, ooh, who am I to be judging them? I'm pointing my finger at them and I got three pointing back. And then you stop and you humble yourself a bit. Because as long as you're too righteous and too proud to admit what you see in them inside you, you're going to talk down to them, expect them to live in your values and be self-righteous and be in a moral hypocrisy. And the moral hypocrisies run people's lives. So once you do that and own that until the quantity and quality are equal, which I have taken well over 100,000 people through in my Breakthrough Experience program to prove that it's true. And people don't want to believe it at first. They're so programmed by moral hypocrisies that they don't believe it. They want to be righteous. They want to hold on to their pride and want to pretend they don't do that. But the truth is, you can't judge somebody unless you have it. Then you go to the next question. Go to the moment where and when I perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating the specific trait, action or inaction that I dislike or hate most. And at that moment, and in that moment of perception, because that's when the conscious and unconscious split, in that moment, what was the benefit to me? Just like the guy who's in the trunk. What was the benefit to me? At first, you're going to say, there is no benefit. And when somebody says that in less than a second, they didn't even look. They didn't even try to look. But I'm not interested in them holding on to their victim mentality. I'm interested in them being accountable. Mm-hmm. And I said, so now what's the benefit? How does it help you spiritually? How does it help you intellectually and your mind development? How's it helping you in your business? How's it helping you in your wealth building? How's it helping you in your relationship? How's it helping you socially in leadership skills? How's it helping you in your physical health and well-being? And I go around the wheel of life and I help them link it to all the things that they want to empower in their life. And don't stop until the benefits equal the drawbacks. And in every case, it's available if people are willing to take the time to look. Because it's a heaven into a hell or a hell into heaven. If you don't look, you just want to blame and create a false attribution bias and exaggerate something instead of being honest with yourself. Once you do that, you'll realize, wow, I do the same thing. And now there's just as many benefits as drawbacks. So I'm not even a victim. I now don't even see them as somebody that I now blame. I now see them as somebody who's been my teacher, teaching me how to reflect and introspect and honor who I am and love all parts of me and realize that people are in my life, because anything you're trying to avoid in yourself, you're going to be seeking its opposite. Whatever you try to run away from, you keep running into to teach you how to love that too. You're here to love it all. Anything you don't love and appreciate is going to be your baggage in life, and it's going to make you a victim of history. Anything you can be grateful for and love is going to make you a master of destiny.
You know, I know that everyone listening is like online immediately purchasing every book you've ever written and going to your website, which we'll discuss in a second. What I love about your work and what I think shines through in the way that you speak is like this. It's an intensely layered, curious, critical thinking, which is so needed right now in this world. And I think for everybody, not only just for success, for personal relationships, for everything, the perception. And so I love it. I love these layers. And this is just so wonderful because you're doing those deep dives that a lot of people who are in your industry are elusively speaking on a sort of cloud level. It's not as layered and deep as this. And I love that. Please tell us, we'll put everything, of course, in the show notes to connect with you, but you have a method, you have lots of trainings. I could even become certified in what you do. Tell us all of the ways that we can benefit other than buying your books from your experience and from what you have to teach us.
Well, I'm just, all I do is teach, research, write, and travel the world. That's my thing. I'm useless everywhere else. But those 4 things I'm pretty good at. But if somebody wanted to learn more about what we're doing, just go to drdemartini.com first. Do the value determination process to determine what you really value. It's free, it's complimentary, it's private. Just go on drdemartini.com and look for determine your values. It's eye-opening. It will be eye-opening. And I would do it again a week later, a month later, and 3 months later. So you get past your facades that you want to give yourself at first, because you can answer honestly then. Then, if you're interested more, go to the media page or go to Dr. Demartini's podcast show, because my show or whatever. There is on the media literally hundreds, thousands of interviews, articles, magazines, newspapers. I've written for 1,530 magazines around the world. So there's just gobs and gobs and gobs of articles, videos, available information to help you. There's also events, and there's products, and there's books, and there's CDs, and there's all kinds of things for people who are interested in whatever means they want to learn. But the most significant thing that I could offer people is a live experience, because it's one thing to read, it's another thing to actually be accountable to do it. That's where the breakthrough experience is where I actually show people how to do it and really make them accountable to do it, so they guarantee a result, so they can have that the rest of their life. So they know what their values are, and they know how to dissolve emotional baggage and know how to not subordinate to the people around them and to be authentic. So I've been doing that program for 34 years. I've done it 1,160 times. I'm pretty certain that you can't come to that program without having your mind blown. I've asked people at the end of the program, how many of you learned something this weekend that for a fact you could have gone your whole life, and if you hadn't been here, you would not have learned? Every hand goes up.
I love it. Thank you so much for what you've put out into the world, for coming on the show. I'm so excited for the audience to jump on everything that you have to offer. Like you mentioned, we'll put everything in the show notes to connect with you. Thank you so much. Any last thoughts? Although you've given us so many great ones.
I don't know how much time do I have, because I have a story.
Yeah, if you have more time, we have time.
Do you have the time for a story?
I do.
I'd like to share this story because I think this would be kind of a mind blower. I was asked to meet with 5 Israeli leaders and 3 Palestinian leaders a few years ago. And we entered into a hotel special room, a secured room. And when I walked in, everybody was sitting there around a kind of a big board table. And when I stood at the front and was about to begin, one of the Israeli leaders said, "Dr. Demartini, do you believe in absolute evil?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I do." And so I retorted. And she had a translator there and also a negotiator that works with her. And I said, "Well, is it possible that that belief system is what's undermining your 14-year attempt to negotiate something with supposedly your colleagues that we're here in the room with?" And she kind of didn't like that, but I said it anyway. Because if you believe in absolute evil and you're in black and white thinking, there's no negotiation. There's just self-righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our first statement. So I then turned around and figured I would use her as a perfect in, because I couldn't have asked for a greater in. I said, "Now, ma'am, this is a woman. I said, what exactly do you perceive to be absolute evil?" Now, she was talking about the man on the other side of the table. So she said, intolerance. And I was,
I'm already laughing.
yeah, I was laughing too inside, but I didn't laugh in front of him. I just thought, are you that dense, babe? You can't see the obvious. So that's what was really going on in my head. But I thought, no, I'll be professional here. And so I said, intolerance. She said, intolerance. Absolute evil is being totally intolerant. What that really means is intolerant of your demand on them doing what you want.
Right.
You're not caring enough about them to communicate in their values. So I said, great. Now, write this down. You have a form in front of you, and right, there's a little place there, column 8. Put the individual, you don't have to tell me who it is, even though I knew who it was. Put the name at the top, or initial at the top of the individual who you're doing, and over in column 8 at the top line, put intolerance. Okay, she did. I said, everybody here who has some emotional charge against somebody that you have had to negotiate with, write their name, you can abbreviate it, and write down what trait, action, or inaction you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that you resent and despise and dislike most. And so they all did. I said, now, ma'am, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, inaction that you despised in this individual most, intolerance. And she said, I pride myself in not being intolerant. Everybody I know knows I'm very tolerant. I would never be like that. Whenever you see black and white, always and nevers, you know you're dealing with the most absolute infinity over one or one over infinity mentality, which is a subjective bias and a distorted racial perceptions. So I said, okay. Now I figured because I'm the leader, I'm going to be the authority figure in the class for the day. I said, I'm certainly intolerant. And she stopped and looked at me. I'm intolerant sometimes at the airport when they don't have my ticket ready. I'm intolerant. I'm intolerant when there's a delay in the plane. I'm intolerant when the hotel doesn't have my room just ready. I'm intolerant with this. And I started listing about 50 intolerances. In the process of doing 50 intolerances, I said, now that I have intolerances and maybe I've expanded your awareness of it, can you see where you might have been intolerant? And she said, yes. I said, let's list them. Where, when, to whom, and who perceives you that way. And I held her accountable until 39 of them passed. Mm. And she got a tear in the eye. And she got humbled. And she had reflective awareness and introspection. And she stopped. And some of the anger already stopped because she realized what a hypocrite she was. What a moral hypocrite. Then I asked her a simple question, number 3. Go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual that you're judging as intolerant. And not hearsay, not something you read, but something you've factually seen with a sense. And she said, okay, you there? Great. Where are you? When are you? Now, at that moment, how did it benefit your life? And she said, didn't. I didn't ask that. I said, how did it benefit? I didn't ask how it didn't. I asked how it did. But it didn't. If you said that within less than a second, that means you didn't even choose to look. So let's try more than a second and let's look. Because if you don't look, you'll never find it and you'll be, intolerant. So let's go to a moment where that's happened and what's the benefit? And she couldn't see it. And I said, is that the moment you decided to participate in becoming a book author and be active in political work? And she looked at me and she said, yes. I said, is that the catalyst that led you down the path of your career? She said, yes. Is that what made you a leader today? She goes, it did. And are you known for your book? Yes. And did you make income from that? Yes. Speaking opportunities from that? Yes. You have a following of that? Yes. Radio, television, media. You've met leaders and other leaders and celebrities and all kinds of people in that path? Yes. Did you ever thank this individual for being intolerant that day? Did you ever share any of the income you earned from that? She says, no. I said, are you really committed to dissolving the conflict that you have? Or are you committed to becoming famous and using this person as a vehicle to accomplish your aim? Because that's what your life is demonstrating, because you're not getting the conflict resolved. You're actually staying and supporting a bunch of wounded individuals that are angry and becoming famous for it. And that was confronting him. And the whole room was sitting there looking at, all of themselves were doing that. And I said, are you sure you're not leveraging off this and pretending to say one thing, but behind the scenes, no organism will ever annihilate its reason for existence? And she sat there and I said, so let's look at the benefits and stack them up. I got 32 benefits. This was a few hours of work, 32 benefits, until a tear came. When the tear came, she humbled.
Mm-hmm.
And she just sat there. The whole room was just dead silent. There were tears in her eyes, people reaching for Kleenex because I knew I was going to need them. And she said, if you don't mind, I've been sitting here. I really need to relieve my bladder. Okay, let's all take a little bladder break, because they didn't have a bladder break for 3.5 hours. And I said, all right. When she came back, she came to me and she said, Dr. Demartini, there's a shift going on in me.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, when she went to take a pee break, the guy that she was condemning came up to me and he said, Dr. Demartini, that was one wow session. I swear to God, that lady was talking about me. And I said to him, she was.
Yeah.
and he said, you know what? I felt the exact same thing about her. What an intolerant bitch, which is a beautifully inspired teacher of conscious humanity. That's an acronym. So then what happened was they came back in and she came in and she said to me, I think you just changed my life. I said, yeah, I probably screwed it up because you had a good following.
Yeah, you had a good racket going.
You had a good racket going there. But the question is, you came here to mediate a conflict. I'm committed to that. I'm not committed to your career. I'm committed to an outcome. Anyway, she walked out of there and they had communication now. So the next time I came to South Africa, 3 or 4 months later, 3.5 months, I think, she invited me to her radio show. And she told the entire story on the radio show, which I respected and really felt that she was honorable in that moment.
Yeah, sort of falling on her sword a little bit. Yes.
And she shifted her movement of people to truly contribute to the idea of resolution. It was a major breakthrough for her. So I just want to share that story in case people think that somehow you don't have the power to transform your life, or that you think you're a victim of history. If you choose to be, you can be, but you don't have to be.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so grateful you shared that. And it goes back to sort of the very beginning of when you ask people like about the financial independence, like when you were asked, do you really want it? Well, let me see. And that put that really in the forefront, probably after the pee break, right? Of, do I even really want a resolution? You know what I mean? Like with the way that she was actually thinking, that you pointed it out. And what I love is how direct and authentic you are. I know my audience who knows me and feels that I'm a no BS straight up person. It is so refreshing. And I love that about you and your work and just how direct you are to it. You're just asking questions. They're very pointed and you just keep going and driving. And what an amazing outcome. And also I do love the fact that she was open enough to share that. That's very impressive as well. It shows what a transformation she did have.
That's true. So thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful time. Everyone go to drdemartini.com. I will put everything in the show notes to connect with you. And again, I really appreciate your work. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Hey, listeners. Over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture. And it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.